Hi, it's John Kelly. In this module, we are going to discuss the Standard on Quality Management 1, which has been revised. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. Now there are three new sections, each with on the face of it, very complicated effective date. The first is the one we're discussing in this module, Standards for Quality Management 1 Revised, which is General Standards on Quality. They have split out the individual audit quality review standards, and they now apply to reviews as well. It used to be part of SQC1 before. And they, of course, have revised 220. Those are the quality standards for individual audits. Now, it's to be implemented by December the 15th, 2022. The reason for December the 15th is you will see it's going to be effective for clients with year ends after December the 15th, 2022. And that's because there are a few clients who have a Sunday year-end. Food stores, for instance, often do that because it's difficult to count inventory on whatever the year-end happens to be. December 31st, it's easier to count it on a Sunday. So they've picked a year-end, and it changes every year, and it could be before December the 5th or close to December the 15th. So that will capture any client that's really a December 31st year end, but unless you have one of those, it doesn't matter. It's December 2023, which seems like a long time away, year ends, that this will be effective for. So what this means is you have to design your forms, checklists, and manuals to be ready before December the 15th, 2022. I'm going to say you want to do that sometime in the late summer, early fall of 2022. It tends to be a time that firms aren't that busy, and get it ready for everything. There is another year for related services. I don't know why we need that. Perhaps big international firms have difficulty with that. But this presentation is targeted towards small firms that are not network firms, not international firms. So get it all done at once. The quality review for individual engagements, year ends on or after December 22, so that's again 2023 year ends. And the same thing for quality standards for individual audits, 220. So we're going to implement effectively for December 31, 2023 year ends, and the first review has to be performed before December the 15th, 2023. So again, sometime in the fall, summer, that's when I like to do it, of 2023 will be the first time you do the review. Now, there's a little problem there because if you're doing the 2023 or the quality review in the summer and fall of 2023, you're not going to be doing December 2023 year ends. You're going to be doing 2022 year ends or sometime before summer and fall 2023. So maybe a March 2023 year end. Those will not have the new standards apply to them. So you'll just have to understand as you do the review that that's the case. So kind of a complicated set of effective dates. Those are the effective dates for Canada, by the way. Internationally, every country will pick its own. So for those of you that aren't in Canada, you'll need to find out what your country is doing, or if it's just following the international effective dates, but it's going to be the same kind of menu of effective dates. So just make sure you follow it through and find a simple and easy way to implement it. Don't be complicated. Now there are two big changes to this, And the first change is from the use of the word quality control to the use of the word quality management. And I'm kind of not being sarcastic. That is, in terms of the changes, that's one of the biggest changes, and we're just going to have to go SQM, not SQC. I don't know whether I'll ever be able to change. The other thing that's happened in the section is procedures. Things that you used to have to do before as a procedure have become objectives, and those are just something that you hope to accomplish. You don't have to do anything. You just have to have the objective. It's a purpose, it's an objective, which actually makes things a little bit simpler. So we're certainly going to need a new set of forms. If you're the person in charge of coming up with a new set of forms, you are going to have to review the section in detail. I'm not going to go through the detailed changes that are going to be needed. In substance, nothing's needed. In detail, they just added a lot more parts and a lot more words, made it probably less clear than it was before, subdivided it up. But it's mostly the same. Though when people, standard setters, present this section, they go, oh, this is all new. You're now going to have to get an annual independence confirmation. Well, you had to get an annual independence confirmation before, so that's not new. So I'll try to comment on new or not. But again, if you're designing forms, a lot of the words are going to change to agree to the new set of words, but the substance of what you're doing isn't going to be much different. So I said we have to have objectives, and the word objective is used in 3 ways in the section, maybe 4. The first use is as a quality objective. So you can't just look for the word objective, you have to look for the word quality objective, because it means some very specific things, and there's a long list of quality objectives you have to have. So have them, take them all out of the section and go, okay, these are our objectives. It's in 8 and later in 16, an outcome to be achieved. And so you will need a list of all of those in firm policy, so do that. The second use of the word objective is objective of the firm, and the objective of the firm is to have a system so that you can follow the standards. So that's fine. And the third use of the word objective is in the concept of independence. There may be a fourth use, but 3's enough. But just focus on quality objective, those words 2 together, and if those 2 words are together, that's a specific thing that you have to have. Now the section is supposed to be risk-based, but paragraph 8 says that following the procedures in the standard produces a risk-based approach. I would say that following a list of procedures is a procedural approach, but never mind, we'll accept their risk-based approach. The way to accomplish this is in these 2 paragraphs. Establish the objectives and the quality objectives, and there's a list in the standard. Identify and assess risks. Now, in an audit, you develop an understanding of the business, and based on the understanding of the business, you identify and assess risk, and they kind of suggest that here. That is, I guess, kind of what you should be doing. Based on your understanding of the firm, the kind of clients you have, you would identify and assess risks if they were other than those things in the objectives, and then you would respond to the risks. It is to be, as I said, annual. That's no change. They very clearly state that for a small firm, you may scale the response. So you may scale things down, not do quite all of the things they say, and they give you some alternatives, and they say, well, if you're a small firm, you could do this way to make it simpler. So that's important. So if you're the person developing the forms, be sure to size it down to the size of your firm to make it appropriate for the size of your firm, and there are hints in the appendix as to how you might do that. Network firms, and I'm not going to talk about network firms. The The requirements are very similar to before. The definition is similar to before. If you are a member of an international or a network firm, your firm will have their own procedures, and the way you'll find out you're actually part of a network is the network will tell you, here's how you do this process. If you're a small firm and not in a network, you're going to have to figure this out by yourself. Now, a network firm is defined in 16. It's the same definition as before, and if you read it, if you're in an international association, it may well not meet this test, and it may not be a network. So first thing, it has to be aimed at cooperation. Almost all of them are, and it has to be clearly aimed at profit or cost sharing. And that's going to let an awful lot of quote-unquote networks that I know about that are international out, because they are not profit or cost sharing entities. They charge you a monthly fee. That monthly fee pays the costs of the network, and they don't share profit or share costs. So I said the second use of the word objective is objective of the firm, and the objective of the firm is to design and implement a system of quality management and to follow standards, that standard and all other standards. And as I said, the third use of objective is the same as we are to be objective, we are to be independent. That's the third use. So watch it if you're word searching the word objective. Make sure you're on quality objective, not just the word objective. Paragraph 15 is the authority of the standard. It's the same as before. Paragraph 18 says you should have an understanding of the standard. And just to note that having an understanding differs from understanding. If someone says you should understand, that means you've got to understand the whole thing in detail. If you merely have to have an understanding of, that's less of a requirement. And so you might not know everything, but no, I have an understanding of it. That, though, is the same requirement as before, so that's no change. You're supposed to have a system, and the forms and your QC manual will evidence this. You have to have, there is a list of people who have to be in charge, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 people that have to be in charge of various aspects. You have to specify them, and it's a little more detailed than before as to who has to be in charge. I think in a small firm you're going to decide that it's the office managing partner. You've only got 10 partners and that's the one. So it's a little more detailed than before. You do have to document who's in charge. I suppose perhaps that documentation might be implicit, but just to be sure, I would have a spot on my form where I say the person in charge for this is the office managing partner, and decide who's in charge of each thing. Risk assessment procedures 23, 24, 25. The first thing to do is to establish the objectives. There is a list. Establish them all. They all go into firm policy. Then do and document what you have, the procedures you've done. The thing you've got to watch is they say perhaps you have to establish an additional quality objective because there may be an additional quality risk. In a small firm, there may be none. There may be no more risks. What I see some people doing in very small firms, they go, well, I got to think about this. Well, why don't I invent a few so I can have the additional quality objective? Well, don't do that. There's no need to do that unless these quality risks actually exist. And in a small firm, there probably are none. So don't do that. Don't invent risks just so you can say to someone, inspector who's coming in, oh yeah, we had 3 extra risks here. Say to the inspector, yeah, we thought about it and there are none. Objectives, as I said, and there in paragraphs 28 to 33 is a long list of objectives. It's more than just there's 4 or 5 or 6 in each paragraph. You have them. There is the list. Yes, those are our objectives. We agree. 34, specified responses, and there are 8 things that you have to do. You have to have policies and procedures for threats and ethics issues, and that's the same as before. Have a policy. You should have one now. Probably don't have to do much to that policy. You have to obtain annual independence confirmations from staff. That's the same as before. Have a policy. By the way, I see some people trying to get an independence confirmation, sometimes forgetting, having the policy that for every new hire, we will get an independence confirmation the minute they start. That's not what the standard says. You can do it if you want, but if that's what your policy is, then you have to be very sure that you follow it. Policy is an annual independence confirmation for all staff. Far simpler for me to do that. So one day during my quality management review, I'm going to get annual independence confirmations from everybody. Get a staff list, get one from everybody. You have to have policies and procedures for complaints. Same, had to have one before, have one now. Check the words. Client acceptance and continuance, had to have it before, have to have it now. I think the form that I now have is going to have to change a bit because there are more words, different words, but it's the same thing. You have to have a policy for communicating with external parties. Seeing it would be highly unusual and rare and scary for us to reveal client confidential information to an external party. I think my policy will be we won't do it until we talk to the firm's lawyer, and we will only do it under their advice, because telling stuff to an external party is got to be real careful. Clients could complain. You have to do engagement quality review for listed companies. That's the same. Have a policy and do it. If you have any listed clients, do it. You have to do engagement quality review where it's required by law and regulation. Don't actually know of any law and regulation that might require that. Maybe there is something, don't know. It's rare, but have a policy, and if it is required, do it. An engagement quality review for other clients, including review engagement clients. That's the same requirement as before, but again, my suggestion is don't decide to pick the 4 riskiest clients of the firm, because in the context of the level of risk required for engagement quality review, the risks of a listed company, your clients are not that risky at all, probably. So again, don't just pick 2 or 3 clients. If you don't have any listed clients, say, well, guess what? We don't have any clients that need engagement quality review, and we're not going to do it. I've had clients that were listed companies, and we did engagement quality reviews, and it was kind of silly because really they were very small listed companies. They weren't billion dollar listed companies. They were small, and there really was no need for engagement quality review, but we did it. We had to, so we did it, and there was an engagement quality review partner, and didn't issue the statements until they had said it's okay, and we have a checklist, and think about whether you have to do it or not. So if you have to do it, do it. And as I said, you're going to probably need to review current policy and perhaps add a few words here, there, and everywhere to become consistent with the new standard. But in terms of substantively what we did before, really no change. Monitoring and remediation, 35 to 47, not going to go through this in detail. It's the same as before. It's in more detail. Document it. Network, again, 48 to 52, not going to talk about it because I think often the definition of a network firm will exclude any network that you're involved in. And 53, 54, and 55, again, the same but more detail. Evaluate the results, conclude on whether your system is working or not, and respond. We did all of that before. The checklist or forms you use are going to need to change to be consistent with the words in 53, 54, and 55, but it's the same, just more detail. I love this one. You're going to have to evaluate those doing the process. And if it's the office managing partner doing it, then I guess it's the office managing partner who has to review whether the office managing partner is doing a good job or not. It doesn't say that you can't do that. It suggests that maybe you might hire an external party to do it, but if you're in a small firm and there aren't a lot of risks, I don't know why you would do that. So do it. If you're the office managing partner, review how you did, review how the other people involved did, conclude whether or not you did a good job and whether you should be replaced or not. And as I say, in a small firm, it may have to be done by those doing the process. Fine. Documentation, paragraph 57, do it. You have to have sufficient documentation so the staff can understand the firm policy, so have a policy manual, that's the same. You have to document your responses, and maybe there are none. In my firm, when we did this process, sometimes we looked at a file and went, it was fine. So there were no responses. If there are responses, if someone wasn't doing something quite right or didn't fill out a form properly or didn't do something right, well, you would have a chat. Now, if someone comes to you and says, hey, you haven't documented this as well as you should, read them the following paragraphs, and there's one on the next slide too, A202. You do not have to document every matter considered or judgment made. You don't have to. So you can say, well, that was a matter we didn't consider necessary to document. 203, that manuals, checklists, forms, email, website postings all form part of the documentation. When I was doing the annual independence confirmations, we had 5 or 10 public companies. You absolutely have to be independent of those and every other client as far as I'm concerned. So I would send an email around to staff saying, okay, by the way, this is our list of public companies if you don't know, and you can't own shares. You have to be independent. And I would send that out a couple of days before I would go get the independence confirmations. And I would print out that email and put it in the file and show it to practice inspectors. The other thing in A203, in a smaller firm, informal, undocumented communication is okay. So if you had a response and all the response was, talk to the engagement partner, he won't do that again, that's appropriate documentation. And make a little note. There are a series of matters you have to include in the documentation. You have to include the names of those responsible, so do it. Make sure it's in the form and make sure it's implicit in firm policy in the forms. It is firm policy that the office managing partner is in charge. You have to document quality, objectives, and risks. Well, there's a list in the standard. You have all those. And if there's any others you can think of, and maybe you can't, you document those too. You have to document your responses. That was in the previous section as well. The response should be obvious in the response, and there may be none, as I said. You have to document monitoring activities, findings, actions, and communications. And that, again, should be obvious from the monitoring form, so make sure that you've got that in the forms. And then a conclusion, have that in the form. You have to keep your documentation of quality monitoring for a period of time. It is unspecified, is an appropriate period of time. For no particular reason, I picked 10 years. Seemed like a nice round number. And final comment, if someone says you have to document something and you haven't, A205, it is not required to document the consideration of every condition, event, circumstance, action, or inaction for each quality objective or each risk that may give rise to a quality risk. You don't have to document absolutely everything. There are some people who think you do, and they produce forms and documentation that, man, it's a veritable essay. We have to be efficient and effective. We have to follow standards. The two need to balance out someplace, and this section and the 2 on the previous page or the 3 on the previous page allow us to do that. Now, is this section new or not? It's certainly presented by the standard setters that I've heard of as all new. Oh, this is all brand new. It's not. There's not much that is new. there are more words and less clarity and more detail, so that will affect the words you use in the form. I've said this before of new standards because it's starting to become a standard in standards, that much is the same, repeated, or in much greater detail. So it's not new particularly, but you are going to need to go through your forms, and you've got some time to do that. So, thanks for listening.